Hello, everyone. I'm Sarah Devlin, and I am the founder and director of Women in Wildlife Photography. And we are here today to do a photo review for one of our recent tours, and that was to Churchill to photograph polar bears. So we have, right now, we have two of the ladies. Hopefully, we'll have three of them that were on this trip, and they're going to show us some of their magnificent photos. I've already had a chance to see some of them in our Facebook group, and I think that we're just going to be blown away. We also have with us the very talented Dawn Wilson, and she actually led this tour to Churchill. So we're going to start with throwing it over to Dawn. She's going to introduce herself and tell us what this tour was like, and then we'll get into reviewing some of the photos.
Thanks, Sarah. So it's good to see everybody. It's been, I guess we've been back about 6 weeks now. So everybody's been busy editing. I know I've seen, like Sarah said, I've seen some photos come up on Facebook. So it's been interesting to follow along and relive the experiences. Just a little bit of background about me. I've been working with Women in Wildlife. This is the second tour that I've done for them. I have several more coming up in the next year. But this was also not my first time to Churchill. I've been going to Churchill since 2013, and it's just an absolutely amazing place. It's pretty remote. You know, you go in the time of year when the weather's can be a little bit rough and chilly, but it's absolutely gorgeous there. So we had a great trip with lots, not just a lot of polar bears, but we also saw, oh gosh, we had some quite several different ducks. We had a lot of snow buntings, which I was hoping to see. A lot of fox. So we're going to take a look at some of those. We had a spectacular night with northern lights too. So we are heading back again next year. We're going to go in November in 2025. This trip was at the end of October, so weather patterns tend to vary just slightly, a little bit more into November. So why don't we jump into some of the photos that we have? There we go. So one of the, as I mentioned, in addition to polar bears, one of the things that we do see quite a bit of in Churchill are willow ptarmigan. So there are three different types of ptarmigan. You have here in Colorado, where I live, we have white-tailed ptarmigan, and then the tundra in places like Alaska and Canada have willow ptarmigan and I'm drawing a blank on the other one, but there's a third one. But up in Churchill, we see quite a few willow ptarmigan. And at the end of October, we're just starting to get some snow, but the birds have turned white already. So you get this nice juxtaposition of some fall colors, some remaining fall colors, while the birds are white. So they kind of pop off of that. You can go to the next one, Dee. And this is that snow bunting, the group. I've been up there quite a few times. This was the first time that I've actually seen a lot of tolerant snow buntings. I've tried to photograph them before without much luck. They tend to be a little bit flittery. But when we see them up in Churchill at this time of year, they're actually in their winter plumage. So in summer, they're very white and grayish color. They have a little bit of gray on their backs, whereas in the wintertime, they actually turn a little bit darker. They get more of this rust color on them. So they're still very, very pretty. They just look a little bit different. But I was kind of running around trying to get some photos of these guys. And we had several different flocks that were out on the beach that would get pretty tolerant while we were looking for other animals. So I was happy to finally photograph those little guys. You can go on to the next one, Dee. This is, as I mentioned, we saw quite a few red fox. In the past, there have been a lot of Arctic fox in this area, but as climate change has kind of changed the dynamics of the ecosystem up there, the red fox are actually doing really, really well. The Arctic fox come in a little bit later as the polar bears come in, and then the Arctic fox follow the polar bears out into the ice to kind of scavenge off of the food that the polar bears catch. But the red fox are doing really well, especially around town. And on this trip, we not only saw the red coat, but we also saw a silver fox and we saw a cross fox. So those are they're all red fox species, but the coat color is a little bit different. This is your traditional red color, or the more orangey color of the fox. This guy we saw a couple different days and was a little bit curious. He would kind of scurry off when we would stop and then come back and kind of sit and look at us. So always fun to photograph these beautiful animals, especially in their winter coats. Go ahead, Dee. So this is the of my photos that I have for tonight. This is the first polar bear shot. One of the things that I love to do, especially as a tour leader, is that I like to show what the area looks like. I love to get the animals in their landscape. And one of the things that's unique about the Churchill area is that they have all these black Cambrian rocks that kind of line the edge of Hudson Bay. So it makes, when you get the snow on it, it makes this nice contrast of white snow and black. It's like a really dark gray, almost black rock. And we had this polar bear that was walking through the field in front of it. So this kind of gives you an idea of what that landscape can kind of look like. For the most part, it's pretty flat, other than these rocks that are around the edge of the water on the bay there. Go ahead, Dean. So up in Canada, we have a local guide that we work with for a couple of different reasons. One, for safety. We can't travel, because polar bears are your top predators. We do have some safety equipment that we keep with us to make sure that our group stays safe when we're around the polar bears. But the other benefit of it is that they really know the area. They know all the like little secret nooks and crannies. And this guy was really good about finding those. And this was one of his, I think he actually even called it his secret spot. And it was this nice little, it was almost like a cove along the edge of the water. And we had been following this male polar bear. He started stretching on the rocks, and all of a sudden he started walking along, and we saw this opportunity for this reflection to come up. And I think all of us were pretty excited about having it. And it was just our group. It was a pretty sweet moment to have just our small group actually capture this photo, be a series of photos of this bear as it walked along the edge of Hudson Bay with this really nice reflection, and the blue sky was reflecting in the water to create that blue surface. So it was a pretty special moment. Go ahead, Dee. And then this is another one we had. The ice was forming while we were out there. This guy was pretty curious. This is a younger bear, and it was just kind of walked along not too far from us and kind of strolled along the ice. So, of course, we always love to get polar bears because they're kind of a cream color. Most people think of them as white, but they're actually more of a cream color. But he was walking along, and then you get that nice gray and white in the background. So it's a nice contrast of what that scenario or what that scene looks like. But you can see how big his paws are. But they are such amazing animals. But the thing that's nice about the tour that we do is that we actually travel around in SUVs or vans. We actually were out in vans. And so that allows us to kind of use the road system in the area, and then we can get out of the vehicle and actually get some low angle shots and kind of be at eye level with the bears. So it's a much different experience than some other groups go out on tundra buggies. So in the tundra buggies, you certainly get access into different areas than the road system goes. But from the tundra buggies, you can only photograph down on the bears. So I really like the way that I've been doing this for several years, of using vehicles that actually are road based, and we can get a little bit closer and a little bit at more eye level with all of the animals, not just the polar bears, but the fox, the birds. You saw that the photo of the bunting was actually at ground level. I was laying on the ground to get that photo. So that's what makes this a little bit more of a unique trip. Go ahead, Dee. And then this is one of the still photos. I have something that I told the group I was going to do that I just finished up today in a minute. But this is one of the photos from the night that we went out for the Northern Lights. So we had several nights where we thought we were going to get some Northern Lights, but it kind of fizzled out. And then towards the end of the trip, we had all of the numbers came in. Me and one of the local guides, we keep an eye on the apps that we use to predict Northern Lights. And then we also obviously need a clear sky. So that's you need those perfect combination of all the elements coming together, and it happened. I mean, we were out there for about 2 hours. You know, it's we go out to an area that's away from the coasts because obviously we don't want to be out in the dark with bears roaming around. So we go out to this forest area where the bears typically are not hanging out. But it also gives a really nice base when you photograph northern lights. You really want to have something terrestrial in your photograph so you feel like you're standing on earth, and then you see this big sky, and it was just spectacular. It was one of the best shows I've seen of northern lights anywhere. So where Churchill sits, you're actually right, you're pretty close to the Arctic Circle, but you're within the circle of northern lights. So it was a pretty special night. Go ahead, Dee. And then this was one of the sunrises that we had. Actually, it was on our last morning there. So one of the things is that because the fall season, so the polar bear season, which is what we time our trip for, starts at the middle to end of October and then goes through the end of November. And because of that time of year, the weather's changing, so you start to see a lot of weather patterns. The temperature's dropping, and because Hudson Bay hasn't frozen yet, you get a lot of moisture in the air. That water's warmer than the air, and it tends to, the moisture just kind of comes off the surface of the water, and it tends to create a lot of weather patterns. So you get a lot of clouds, you get a lot of fog conditions, those kinds of scenarios, but which is beautiful for photographing the polar bears. But the downside to it is that you don't often get very good sunrises or sunsets when you're there. So I usually try to let the group know ahead of time that, hey, if we're out and we see it, we will photograph it, but don't be anticipating a lot of really stunning sunrises. This trip, however, we actually had several days where we had not just where we had pretty sunrises and sunsets. And then I saw this happening as we were leaving our house, and we stay in bed and breakfast homes, private homes. And we were actually leaving downtown Churchill, heading out along the coast of Hudson Bay. And this is a cemetery that's in Churchill. And I loved how the position of the rising sun, and there's kind of like almost a beam. It's a kind of faint, but there was a little bit of a beam of light rising up out of that. But it was just this unbelievable sunrise that last morning. So I was happy to see that. So this was all from that night that we went out for Northern Lights. So this is just a series of still frames that I took while we were out there that I then combined into, I don't know what that was. It was almost like a meteor or something falling. I have a couple frames where things like that were happening, but yeah, basically what I do is I set my tripod up and let the camera go, and it just takes frames for, let's say 15 minutes or however long I let the shutter release go. And then I stitch those frames together in Photoshop to make little time-lapse videos out of them.
Wow.
But it was a
Spectacular.
unbelievable night of Northern
Yeah.
Lights.
Okay, so I think we're going to move on to the ladies now and their photos. I don't know who's up first. Terry? Do we have Terry's photos?
We have Terry at first. Terry
Okay.
B.
All right, let's get Terry's photos up. Thank you, Dawn. That was spectacular.
No, thank everybody. I thank everybody else. I mean, we had a great group. Everybody was super willing to be out there, and I mean, to stay out in the cold for 2 hours photographing Northern Lights. I think that talks to just how special the light show was that night that we were there.
Yeah, that was a special bonus. From the photos that I've seen, I really wasn't expecting that. I was expecting fantastic polar bear photos, but Northern Lights were just looks like you guys really had quite a show.
Yeah, the Northern Lights definitely are always one of the bonuses. It's just because all the elements have to come together, and there's no guarantee that will happen. But we happen to be at the kind of the peak of the solar cycle right now for Northern Lights, so um, we've had quite a few pretty spectacular shows this year. But
Yeah.
Churchill, because of where it sits close to the Arctic Circle, actually gets a lot of northern lights. It's a good spot to go in the wintertime to photograph them. And they actually do, um, it's one of the popular spots just because I don't want to say it's easily accessible, but there's an airport you can fly right into Churchill. Churchill is basically has no roads leading into it. So the only way you can get there is either by plane or train. So it's not the easiest place in the world to access, but it is accessible, compared to other places for Northern Lights. So it's an interesting place for that if you can tolerate the cold. That's what makes the fall really good for photographing Northern Lights, is that it's not quite as cold as if you go out to someplace like in February or early March.
Would you say it was at peak dawn, the Northern Lights? Because honestly, the photos that I've seen are really the most spectacular Northern Lights photos that I've ever seen. And I don't have a lot of experience personally with photographing Northern Lights. Um, but just from what I've seen with your photos, those look pretty spectacular.
Yeah, so the solar cycle runs on 11, it's an 11-year cycle. And it has to do a lot with, it's kind of like, kind of like Earth has a 365-day cycle where it tilts and rotates, right? You get more southern light in the wintertime, you get more northern light in the summertime. Well, the sun goes through the same thing, but the sun's 11 years. And as it rotates, it basically kind of shakes up all that energy, and it shoots out these energy blasts, basically in
Ah,
a super
okay.
simplistic description.
Yeah.
And those energy blasts are at their peak right now. The sun's actually in the process of tilting again. So that's why the Northern Lights have been so spectacular last year, this year, and they will continue into next year.
All right. So whose photo do we have here?
This is Terry B's.
It's beautiful.
Thank you. I love the snow, the blowing snow.
Yeah. Yeah, it has a very dreamlike quality. It's gorgeous.
So the photos that I submitted, I put just one of them was just for sharing. This one and the two Northern Lights photos, I was kind of looking for feedback on because I don't do a lot in the snow, and I wasn't sure if this was a good way to process this. I mostly just didn't do anything that made more contrast to try to leave that snowy look, because this was where the snow kind of started blowing up after he came up, or she came across the pond. But I kind of like the way it turned out. So,
Yeah, and I mean, I think that's part of photographing in Churchill, is that you want to capture not just the wildlife that we're seeing, but you want to capture the elements. There's more places than not do not get these kind of conditions. The blowing snow and wildlife, big mammals that live in it. Most animals migrate out of snowy areas, so it's a nice combination of having that weather. You can see up at the top of the photo, you can see it's snowing, and it's not soft, it's not fog. You can actually see that it's blowing snow. You could potentially you maybe crop it a little bit more, so you don't need a lot of this foreground in here. And maybe add just a little bit more contrast to bring out some of the detail in the bear and the fur. But I agree that I like it where you see that snow, you see the conditions that the bear is walking through. And you did a good job of it can be hard to get focus in snow. The newer cameras are doing a much better job these days with the autofocus, especially with bears. You have real dark eyes against white fur, so the contrast is there for the cameras to pick up the eyes. So that's one thing that helps. But sometimes if the snow's too, especially with big flakes, heavy blowing big flakes, the camera can want to photograph or lock on to the flakes for its focus versus the animal itself. And you've done a good job here of making sure that the bear is in focus.
okay. So you just add a little local contrast on the bear itself.
Yeah, you could do that. And that way it'll bring out the eyes a little bit more. It'll bring out a
Okay.
little bit more of the detail on the face and in the fur.
Okay. Thanks.
So Terry, you said that one and it was the Northern Lights
The
for
Northern Light.
editing. Okay.
Yeah,
And I
because
know we
I
had, sorry, go ahead.
no, I'm sorry. The Northern Lights, I was really at a loss as to how to process them because it was my first time ever shooting them, and it was difficult. I mean, it seems like more of an artistic endeavor than it is a reality endeavor. And so I looked at a lot of them out there trying to figure out what colors am I going for. And of course, what I remembered the most was that we were seeing greens until we turned around and there was that one part where we were seeing purples and reds. But anyway, so feedback.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that I noticed going through mine as well is that we had so much color when we were out there, is that I didn't need to add a lot of color into my own photos. So my guess is you're almost finding the same thing. The goal of photographing northern lights is that you want to be able to see the patterns of what it's creating, and you've done that. You have on, in the center here, you're actually picking up some of those streaks. You're picking up the waves that are happening out there. Your stars look sharp, so your shutter time was good. um, I would maybe try to bring down these really bright spots. um, I think the color looks pretty good. You have nice contrast between the dark trees. My preference is to have those really silhouetted out, so that you don't see, so there's not a lot of distractions there. You really want to have, the eyeballs kind of go all into the sky above, and that's where all the drama is happening. But usually the things that I do with Northern Lights is that I'm careful about adding in too much whites. It can make it look too saturated and a little bit too gimmicky almost. And you have not done that. I do bring down the highlights a little bit, but not too much because I want to have the brightness of it. Um, and I do a lot of times bring up clarity on it, and that'll help with some of the, showing those streaks and showing the patterns in there. But really, we had such a spectacular night while we were out there that there wasn't a lot um, that needed to be done to the photos. At this point of the evening, I did notice there's a little bit to the left of this center feature. There's a little bit of red in there. As I was going through and processing them, I noticed that I wasn't seeing it at night, but our cameras pick up more colors. So you could potentially work on that, maybe bring that saturation up a little bit, either by the way I do that is going through in Lightroom onto the color mixer and then using the selection tool and then picking that color and actually saturating it just a little bit more.
Okay.
But otherwise, there really wasn't a lot that should need to be done on editing the Northern Lights photos.
Okay. Thank you.
I think it looks fabulous, Terry. It's beautiful. Did a great job.
Yeah, it was interesting that we had. So when we saw Northern Lights, from most places, like if we get them here in Colorado, you look to the north and you see them usually in the northern sky. When we were up there, because of where Churchill sits, they were everywhere in the sky. So to the north, they were very, very green, like what Terry's photo just had. But then when we looked behind us and kind of I think it was to the west and to the south a little bit, we started getting, there were all these colors in the sky, these pinks and purples and blues and reddish colors. It was pretty special.
Okay,
So
so
Terry,
this one I just mostly shared just to share. It was one of my favorites. I mean, I'm always open to feedback, but I enjoyed that this bear got so close to us that we were able to get some close shots. I mean, it is cropped a little bit, but it was still it was one of my favorite moments. So
yeah, we had a couple of really curious bears that walked right up to us. So the way that you've cropped this, I like that you've cropped it so you see a little bit of the body, but not a ton of it, which helps bring in your eye to the face. And I like that the paw is up so that you get some perspective of the animal, of this bear moving. So and he's looking right at you. You've done a nice job of bringing out the shadows in the eyes. These eyes are so dark on polar bears, but you can see a little bit of that brown. There's a little bit of distinction between the pupil and the brown on the eye, which is important to bring life into animal photos. Is that you don't want it to be all just real dark eyes. So nice job on this.
And the last one is just another Northern Lights photo. So
Oh, cool. Yeah, look at it. I mean, so again, Terry, have you done any processing on these yet?
yes,
Okay.
yeah,
Um, because the color that we had out there were some blues and definitely a lot of greens. And again, you've done a nice job with the shutter speed on this to pick up the details of the different, the different waves in this, in the Northern Lights. And then you have, your trees in the foreground are nice and sharp. So you're getting that nice depth of field in there. I think this looks really, really great.
thank you.
Yeah,
That
if
was
you
all.
wanted, sorry, the one thing, if you wanted to do anything, you were asking about colors before, because you can see down here at the bottom, there's kind of like some yellow lights, and then it gets a little bit more blue towards the top. It looks like there's actually a little bit of pink or purple in here too. So again, you can maybe bring out some of that color. It looks like there's a little bit of pink over here on the right-hand side, and you can just bring up those saturation sliders in the mixer panel to kind of accentuate that color a little bit. But like you said, I do think that Northern Lights are very much, you can go too far with how much color you put in there, but I think it is a little bit of there's some artistic leverage in just how much color you add into it. But we had some beautiful colors that night. So that was everything you had, right, Terry?
Yes, ma'am.
So what kinds of things were surprising to you on the trip?
The Northern Lights. I was I was shocked. I was not expecting that at all. Um, I mean, the whole trip I just really enjoyed. I really wasn't sure we were going to see that many bears. I mean, it was constant, so that was a little bit of a surprise. Um, I wasn't expecting so many foxes.
Mhm.
And they're always fun. I mean, we see foxes here, but they're fun. So it was wonderful. I thank y'all for it.
No, thank you for joining us. So Dee, why don't we move into Karen's photos next?
So I like to get up close and personal. Um, I am much more get up close rather than see a thing in its environment. Although I did try that, and I'm not even sure what pictures I submitted anymore. But this one was one of my favorite ones. And mostly because he is sitting there looking at, but I clued on this one because you can't. It doesn't look like he has the tags in his ears, and so I was very happy with that one. But I don't know whether it's too close, because I did take it in closer so that you don't see that raised off. But so yeah, my biggest questions are about the content and the framing, you try to this to
Yeah, so one of the benefits of what you were doing versus getting, kind of a wider shot is that you have this really long lens, this long prime lens, and that creates these really beautiful shallow depths of field so that you have this nice soft background. So that's the full frame now. So I like where you position the eyes within the frame. And I like that. So you've done the same thing, even though we don't see the paw in this photo, you can still tell there's movement because of that bend in the elbow. So just like in Terry's photo, you can get the sense of the animal moving around rather than just standing there stationary. So I like that. I like like you said, close-up portraits, really close, tight in. We did have a couple of bears that had some green ears, some they actually use gray ear tags now, so that they're not so obvious. Um, your eyes are dark. I would say maybe add a little bit of dodging on that, so you bring out a little bit more of that brown in the eyes. The bears have such soft brown eyes they're kind of deep and rich brown eyes. But I love the detail that you have in the hair. He's looking at us. There's nice detail from the end of the nose back to the eyes, and then it just kind of starts to drop off a little bit. So you've done a nice job on it.
Okay, so you just used a term that I don't know what it is. You said something about dodging on the eye.
Dodging. So
What
there's
is-
a tool. There's a tool in. Are you in Lightroom or
No,
Photoshop or both?
I use Darktable, but you explain it to me and I'll figure it out.
Okay. So dodging and burning is an old photography. So from the film days, that
Uh-huh.
you would, if you burn something, you made it darker, and if you dodge something, you made it lighter. And it was just the way that you exposed the film. And today in our tools, it's the same terms are used. So if you dodge something, you lighten it up. So you're basically, you either lighten the shadows or whatever the terminology is in the software that you're using.
Uh-huh.
And by doing that, just by lightening those eyes up a little bit, you'll bring out more of that brown tone in there. You don't want to do it too much, because like I said, you still want it to look natural, and bears and polar bears do have dark eyes, but there is detail there, and there is some warmth in those eyes.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So this one, I have the bigger, farther out picture, and I don't know whether I submitted that one or not, where you can really see the bear in the environment, and I do really like it. In fact, I just did a book for myself from this trip, and it has both the environment picture and the close-up crop. But I went in close again because in the environment, you really couldn't focus in on, him stepping down through the rocks and him, really looking at his pathway. And so that's what I was really trying to capture with this crop in. So
Karen, I do like what you've done here. I like the angles that are in here. I like the angles of like the rocks and that kind of the triangular shape that the polar bear makes with his paw stepping down. I don't. So this was that bear that we saw, if I remember correctly. This is the bear that we saw walking along the coastline of Hudson Bay,
yeah,
similar to the one where I was shown with the blue reflection.
yes.
The light that day.
Prior to him coming to that pool, as he just came out of the water at the point and was walking through the rocks to get to that beach.
Yeah. No, I like the movement. I would be interested to see what it looks like in a horizontal frame, to see a little bit more on the right hand side. But I will add the caveat that I tend to do a lot of my photos for editorial work, so I'm always thinking about, like, how could somebody put like text for a story or something. But like I said, that's kind of my preference, is to see the environment, but you have some of that there. You can see some of that. So I think it tells a really nice story.
Okay, I'll do that at 5.
Does Karen has at least one more photo, right?
So this one, unfortunately, the foot is cropped. The foot's not there. So it's not like I cropped too closely, but I chose this one simply because of the look in the eye. I mean, him looking back, knowing we were there, keeping an eye on it. I loved it simply because of the look in the eye.
Yeah, you can. Well, and Karen, you're right that, so here you can see that look in the eye. You see that little white area within this on the inside part of the eye. You can also see the scars on his face, which I think is interesting. These bears spend a lot of time. They tend to be very solitary, and when males kind of, sometimes they'll fight with females too during the mating season if a female doesn't want to mate, or she's protecting her cubs or something. So these bears can fight quite a bit. So it's interesting that you have that side look with the scars too. So again, it tells more of a story. I love that, even though the foot is clipped a little bit, it's nice to see the blue around the bear, because that gives that contrast and really helps isolate that bear, especially the head with that look back expression. So it's a nice moment, Karen. Nice job.
I don't know what to say. It's just a fox.
It's just a fox. Karen had fun trying to catch
But all
these
the
foxes.
foxes, of all my fox pictures, this is the one who's looking at me, so.
I love the movement. I just have to jump in and just say that that's the first thing that struck me is I love the movement that you caught. You can see it in the fur. Um, just some really nice effect there. I love that. Go ahead, Dawn.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. One, I love that the fox is looking at towards the camera. That you're catching. You can see the winds blowing through because you can see the grasses are kind of bent in the background, but you can also tell that the wind's blowing and he's moving. So there's a lot of action and movement within that, which is always important. The whites look really well exposed, which can be a challenge, especially with snow. So yeah, you did a nice job on this. And I know the challenges you went through to get fox photos. So so I'm glad you have one that you're happy with.
Yeah. Yeah, I wound up with a few, but
Good.
this is my top, my top fox. And I think I had one more. I'm not sure what it is. It might be one that I had done a panoramic framing on and not, I hope it's that one because that one, nope, it's not. Okay. There's another close up of the bear. I love that opportunity with him coming across the lake. I was a little disturbed. I had some other pictures that I liked, but it had a very blurry evergreen tree kind of on his back haunches. This is all in focus, and I wasn't really sure about whether or not this dry weed in front of him is too much of a distraction. But I like it.
That's one of the challenges in Churchill compared to some other places where you photograph polar bears, is that there's a lot of vegetation. It's one of the most southern parts of Earth where you get polar bears, and because of that, you get a different landscape. You get more of the willow bushes. You get more of the vegetation that has now dropped all of its leaves. You could darken that down a little bit because your eye will always go to the brightest spot in a photograph, and because the bears are white, you could darken the bushes down in the foreground a little bit to help draw your eye into the bear instead. But like you said, you have really good depth of field. It's sharp on the face, it's sharp on the haunches and the back. Again, I would maybe lighten the eyes up a little bit so that they're not quite so dark. But you can see it's blowing snow. I like the environmental feel around it. So I think you've done a nice job with them.
Okay.
Was that Karen's last image? I think that was 5. All right. Then the next batch that we have some images. We had a second Terry on our trip. For a small group, it was amazing that we had 2 Terrys. But yeah, so we have a few of her photos, and unfortunately she was not able to join us tonight, but we definitely wanted to share her photos as well. So here we have another fox photo. Like Karen's photo, it's the paws up. You can see there's movement, and that's always important. There's some nice detail in the fur. I like the backlighting. There's all this rim light around the edges of the fox. So this is really pretty.
It's beautiful. I love the backlighting.
So again, this was our stormy weather day. We had pretty good weather for most of this trip. But this is what people think of with polar bears, right? They think of, the cold and the wind and the snow. And so again, you've got, this bear, it looks like he was probably resting. He still has a lot of snow stuck to his fur. There's good detail in the fur. I love the nice soft background behind the bear. Again, maybe just a little bit of lightning in the eye to bring that out. But the paw up, there's movement there. You can see he's kind of squinting, so you get the feel of wind and blowing snow. So there's a lot of feeling within this photograph.
So Dawn, when you talk about lightning in the eyes, are you talking about, this dodging thing? Is it done to the entire photograph, or are you masking the eyes and only dealing with the eyes? Are you doing something more detailed or something to the entire photo?
Just the eyes.
Just the eyes. Okay, I
Just
just
the eyes.
want
Yep.
that. Okay.
So yeah, you either use a tool where you can just kind of go over just the eye itself, or you can mask and then make adjustments on that mask.
All right, thanks.
Eyes are important, and just like with people photography, the eyes are the windows of the soul, right? So we want to have that connection. That's where we get the connection with animals, is through the eyes. So that's why they say a lot of times you want the eyes to look towards you. That's not always possible with wildlife, but also seeing a little bit of that detail, seeing some life within the eyes helps with that connection. So this is another one of Terry's photos. This is one of the willow ptarmigan. It looks like she probably caught this bird just as it was either beginning to shake, or just as it was finishing a shake, because she has a lot of detail in those feathers. You can see all the layers there. More often, when they're just sitting there, they're kind of compact and they're tight because they have to retain that heat in, right? So she's caught an interesting moment, and she's also got a lot of that, some of the fall color, which is nice. She got down low, getting a connection with the eyes. It's with the eyes of the bird. So this is, these are fun little birds. I love these little birds. So I was going to ask Karen, I didn't ask her what she thought of the trip, but she is not there at the moment.
Well, I actually I have a more of commentary and then maybe a question. I have yet to get to Churchill, and of course, after seeing all these photos, and it's definitely on my bucket list. But there's a couple things that I noticed that distinguishes this tour from other Churchill tours. And Dawn, you kind of touched on it. I mean, I always, would see these big, what do you call them, buggies?
Tundra
Um,
buggies.
yeah, yeah. And the photos that I see coming from those are you're looking down. You're looking down
Correct.
on the polar bear. So I'm wondering what it was like for you guys to really be able to photograph these bears. Basically, from what I can see, you're at eye level. And that's not always the case in Churchill. Um, so, I'm sure that it makes a difference in the photos. I can see it. I can see it compared to other Churchill photos that I see. And the other thing is that um, I have been in designing this tour or working on this tour and putting it together. I have been working with this particular guide in Churchill for a couple years, as Dawn has, I believe, even a longer relationship with
Hmm.
them. And I'm really, really impressed with their kind of, we'll call it inside knowledge. It seems like they knew exactly where to go. And, we're really in tune to keeping everybody safe. Those are just some initial thoughts that I'm getting from listening to you guys. So, and the last thing that I think really distinguishes this tour from other ones is, of course, that it's all women. So, um, I want to ask both of you that are here, Terry. I mean, what was it like for you, um, being on an all women's photography tour? Have you ever been on a tour that was co-ed, and how does this compare? And what made this different for you? Or what did you like about it being an all women's tour?
Um, I did enjoy it. I don't know that I really have had issues with other tours that weren't all women, but
Mhm.
it was nice. You know, just the probably more so, not so much the photography part, but more so the accommodations part, you know, where we're sharing living space and that kind of thing probably makes more difference to me. But
Sure.
what you were talking about with the tundra buggies versus being down low, that was one of the major reasons why I chose this tour over some other tours.
Yeah.
That and the fact that Dawn was leading it.
Well, of course. Yes, of course.
But yeah, to me the that perspective is everything. Um,
Yeah. Yeah,
really does.
really makes a difference in the photos. Definitely. Karen, what about you? I mean, did you like traveling with an all women's tour?
Well, yes, I did. And what I loved probably more than all women was the size of it. I was just shocked that it was 4 clients and and a guide and our photographer guide John. I mean, it's such a small number. And of course, every time we stopped and all the other people stopped, and now you have the big group trying to all get their pictures. Everybody was really kind of great. I did like the fact that I've been on 2 other photography tours, so not very many. They were both co-ed, but you just go back to your room and you're by yourself, and you know, but being able to talk about the day, get to know somebody, get to potentially make a friend, that was really great. The Everything about it was wonderful. I prior up until we had our Zoom meeting, getting ready for this meeting or this trip, I thought we were going to be in buggies. I mean, I've been Zooming and I obviously didn't read
Oh,
close
really?
enough. So I thought that the buggy
Huh.
experience was what I was going to get. And I was telling all my family who were concerned about me getting too close to a polar bear that I would be up in this back of the buggy and I'd be protected and no problem, people. Um, so the fact that we were able to go out and get the close-up experience, this was a trip of a lifetime. The experience,
Yeah.
I can't put it into words what it was like to be out there, and yet we all felt safe. I mean, I think the first day, the guide and us were establishing a relationship, a trust. Um, but once that was established, he allowed us a little bit more reign. Um, we got to have experiences that others wouldn't have had. And on the last day, when a certain situation arose, it was only the 3 vehicles that were all from this guided tour. All these guides knew each other. It was very obvious that they worked very closely together. They really allowed us to stay and have pictures, but yet kept us safe and made us back off in a very calm and organized manner. I was very impressed. I thoroughly, thoroughly enjoyed this.
How did they make, like, when you say, because both of you have mentioned that you felt very safe, and I think that that's really an issue on a tour like this, because a lot of people think, oh, polar bears, I mean, they're apex predators. So I'd be interested to hear, like, how I you both, like I said, you both have said it, so you obviously felt very safe, but how did they make you feel safe?
They the time that Karen's talking about, bear started from a long way off and came across the ice towards us. Well, when it was way off and, we're all laying on the ground and a couple of, I'm thinking, okay, how fast can I get up? And at what point do I need to get up? But I didn't really have to worry about it because, as the bear got closer, then they would tell us, okay, y'all need to back up a little bit, and it would get a little closer, and then they say, okay, get on the other side of the van from it and then get in the van. But like Karen said, it was very calm and organized. I mean, it was never I never felt like, oh my God, we've gotten in a bad situation. So
So there was constant vigilance and constant, they were, and obviously well-trained guides. So that's great. That's great. Yeah, because that's
Yeah,
very important to feel safe. Very,
yeah.
very important.
It was absolutely that way. I mean, and I guess, their demeanor. I mean, like I said, their demeanor, their calmness and everything with the situations, just moved over to us. I mean, when we had the one time they said, get in the van. I mean, it's not like we were scrambling in and getting in all willy-nilly. No, we just piled in as we normally would. Very calmly, very organized, because we just didn't feel a rush and urgency. It just was all done well, done very well.
That's great. That's great to hear. Well, thank you, ladies. Does anybody else have anything to add before I wrap this up? Anything else they would like to say? Any advice they would like to give for anybody that would be wanting to do this tour?
I wanted to ask Karen. I asked Terry what she thought was the most unexpected thing. To you, what was the most unexpected, other than finding out you weren't going to be in a tundra buggy? You never mentioned that when we were out there. So
So like, oh wow, I'm getting out there being personal. Um, what was the most, well, okay, if you really want to know what was the most unexpected for me, I expected to be out there freezing. Your advice on equipment and how to bundle up. I mean, I know I'm from Wyoming, I'm used to the cold, but when I went up there, I expected to be cold. And other than my trigger finger, um, being out there taking so many pictures, I was comfortable, and that allows, of course, when you're not shivering, it allows you to take better pictures. But I was surprised it wasn't as cold as I expected it to be, and as a result, I am 1,000% confident I had a better time.
yes, well, and that's that's something that I hope I do bring. I do like the cold, so I spend a lot of time in the cold, so I like to share that knowledge about how to get yourself safe. I have a trip coming up where it's going to probably be about -20, and I'm even starting to freak out about that one. I'm trying to figure out exactly. So I've got gear. I'm going to start testing gear, and but I like to share that knowledge about how to stay safe out there, because you are right. If you're not comfortable, you're going to want to wind up sitting in the van, and then you wind up missing something
Right.
that you regret later.
The only piece of advice I guess I would give is that even though I live in Wyoming, I'm a fair weather photographer for the most part. I like going out when the sun's shining, the wind's not blowing, etc. So even though I've gotten familiar with all my gear, had it was difficult for me on the first day because with all of those layers, I was having a hard time getting my stuff around, working my camera, etc. So I didn't put in enough forethought and practice with having to work with my camera gear with those layers and those thick gloves. I'm usually in just liner gloves and things like that. So any piece of advice would be, if you're not familiar with being in that situation, to spend more time practicing in the new gear that you're in, because I've never done winter photography like that.
It's good advice.
Yeah, winter photography certainly can be a challenge. You have to be prepared for it, that's for sure. Is there anything else anybody wanted to add? Or we can wrap this up.
No, I just want to say thank you, ladies, for joining me and for supporting women in wildlife. And the tours are a lot of fun with, they're small groups, so we definitely get to know each other. We have, it's easier for us to go to dinner. It's easier for us to chat and and learn about each other's backgrounds and our interests and why we're attracted to photography. So I appreciate that, and thank you guys.
Thank you.
Well, yeah, and I really want to thank you, Dawn, for being such a professional and intrepid leader, and for doing such a fantastic job leading these ladies to Churchill. And I want to mention that Dawn's going to be doing it again. She's going to be doing it again next year, this time in November. And last time I checked, we have 2 spaces left. So if there's anybody out there listening to this recording, take a look at that on our website at womenandwildlifephotography.com and sign yourself up. I'll tell you, I want to go. I'm certain I will one day. So, thank you, ladies. Thank you to Terry and Karen for being here and taking the time to share your beautiful photos. They're just absolutely stunning and so inspiring. Very, very, very inspiring. So, thank you. Thank you for joining us, and I hope everyone has a good night. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.